Alright, so this time we'll be discussing MVC. Before we understand what MVC is, however, we need to understand what it's not. MVC is not a programming language. It's not an API or an IDE or any of those fancy TLAs that you see usually. What MVC actually is a concept or an architecture. It doesn't do magical computery stuff itself, it just defines how it's done. If you've studied or tried to study MVC, you might know this. The MVC stands for Model, View, and Controller. It's basically what you'll call a design pattern, defining how the computer or server will interact with the user. To explain MVC in short terms, the model is the component that interacts with the database and runs logic commands on it. The view is the component that deploys the content that the end user sees, and the controller acts as the middleman, receiving and sending requests, getting and setting data. Let's not think about that for a second and let's take an example instead. You walk into your favorite Chinese restaurant on a Friday evening wanting to feast on a large bowl of noodles. What you do is, you sit down at a table and give your order to the waiter. The waiter then takes the order to the chef, who prepares your meal. The chef uses special techniques and tools to help him with this task, and only he knows how to use them right. Similarly, only the waiter has a good idea of how to wait for order and serve orders on tables. Once the meal is ready, your bowl of noodles is sent to your table and you now have delicious Chinese goodness. Now if you wanted another bowl because you're really hungry, you can't do anything by yelling at your current bowl. You have to talk to the waiter again and the whole process is started over. If we look at this from a normal person's point of view, it's basically someone having a general dinner at a restaurant. However, from the point of a computer engineer, things become a bit different. You, as the customer who walks into the restaurant, you're what's called the end user. When you sit down at a table and give your order, you're sending a request. The controller is the chef here, who receives and processes your request. The chef has access to utensils, recipes, and ingredients, which he then uses to fulfill that request. These are what form the model, that is, the component that processes the request and sends out a proper response. The controller then takes that response and sends it back to the view for the end user. Delicious! Now, you might be wondering why we use a controller at all if it just acts as the middleman between sending and receiving data. Well, that's the same as asking why you need the chef in the first place. So, where do we use MVC? MVC finds its most popular use in web development, where you have a clear distinction of where, when, and what you want your end user to see and interact with. Some popular programming languages that implement MVC in their framework include Java, C#, ASP.NET, Ruby, and PHP. It also forms the major backbone in Objective-C, the primary development language for Apple iOS. Let's take an example of how we can use MVC in daily life by applying it in web development. Here, our controller is the programming on the server to direct and redirect the user from page to page. Our view is what the end user sees on his browser, and our model is the set of applications that take and put data into the website's database. All three come together to form a well-functioning website, which can handle users, requests, and data in their own ways. If you're interested in web development practices, you should have a clear idea of how MVC works. It's a pretty important concept, even though you're not using it directly. And with that, we'll wrap things up. Hopefully, this video helped you learn a bit more. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to post them below. This is Savi from StudyTonight.com, and I'll see you later.